Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Our budget deficit has hit a record $2.81 trillion. That means so far in this fiscal year, we have spent $2.81 trillion with a T dollars than more than we took in. And you go, well, Rick, unprecedented economic collapse, COVID, the whole, yes, all of that, lots, big stimulus bill. And yeah, that accounts for about half. The rest of it was, well, a president who is spending like a drunken sailor, even in good economic times, and a massive welfare bill that funded our wealthiest and biggest corporations. So, hey, mission accomplished. They are breaking the bank, as we knew they would. And this is one of those ironic moments because, I lived through the Tea Party era and said during that era that, this is all just shenanigans. It's all nonsense. These people don't actually believe it. Now, look, do I think the folks on the ground buy it? Yeah. But the people who are peddling it, no. They just wanted it spent differently, being given to them. And that's what we're seeing right now. Because, look, it's interesting to me that Ron Johnson, the Republican senator from Wisconsin, is hoping that any stimulus talks completely break down because, well, we've given those nasty people too much money already. They need to go get jobs. Yet there are 4 people right now seeking one job opening. So that's not really likely, but hey, it's good rhetoric, right? We spent almost $3 trillion more. I mean, when you sit back and you think about, the 2016 campaign and the rhetoric that came out of the right wing, that came out of Trump, that because Trump said he was going to balance the budget. In fact, not only do that, he's going to pay off our debt. And yet he has, well, exploded the budget more than even than I could have imagined. To use a Trump frame, no one could have imagined. Everyone's amazed. Everyone's amazed. No one could possibly imagine how good of a job he's done blowing up our budget deficits. And he has done that. He has run nearly $1 trillion every year of his presidency, and now he'll hit 3 by the end of the fiscal year, most certainly, and without question. And the thing is we're in chaos. We're in mass chaos. As yesterday, I was going to talk about this story out of Georgia, where the school down there, the Cherokee County School District, they were hell bent on opening, and there were tons of pictures of kids crowding the halls, and it looked like any other day in a normal high school during normal times. Yesterday, they announced that 800 people were going to be quarantined. Now that number has jumped to over 1,100 students and faculty and folks quarantined. Also, they've now decided, well, maybe we should close the high school. And again, this is one of those moments where you just, this is exactly what we've been saying all along. And, the guy who's one of the top officials at the Federal Reserve, a guy named Eric Rosengren, he's the president of the Boston Fed. He, during their online, their Zoom call or whatever it was, basically placed the blame exactly where it should be of where we are. He said limited or inconsistent efforts by states to control the virus based on public health guidance are not only placing citizens at unnecessary risk of severe illness, possible death, but also likely prolonging the economic downturn. Yes, that's true. He goes on to say, despite the sizable intervention by monetary and fiscal policymakers, the recovery may be losing steam, and activities in many states are once again restricted to slow the virus's spread. And he's like, look, the reality is, the longer we screw around with this, the longer we wait to actually do the things that we need to do, the more painful this is going to be and the more difficult it's going to be to deal with. And this isn't hard to understand. But yet you've got these QAnon nitwits and these anti-maskers and these my right people. And here we are, to where, again, we've now risen above, another day above 1,000 people. In fact, 1,282 deaths yesterday. Thank you, Florida and Georgia, for adding that up, as well as Texas. You go, but hey, but it's only 1,000 people across the country. That's not bad. Until it's one of the 1,000 people that you know. And this is my frustration. And I'll be honest with you, I got some hope today listening to Kamala Harris and Joe Biden's first appearance, their first joint appearance. I thought she did an incredible job of laying out her views, answering some questions on that may be out there of the divisions between her and Joe. I left watching her speech. I left it feeling energized that she's going to bring the passion and she's going to bring the energy that I think they need. And something weird kind of happened today that I came across. Sarah Palin actually looked like a human being. She gave on Instagram, went and offered some advice to Kamala Harris, which I thought was actually very, very good, solid advice. Which is make sure you don't trust anybody new, don't get any new friends because they're not your friends. Keep the people that got you to the dance around you. Keep your advisors and your friends around you, so that the people who know you stay there. I thought that was really good advice. The one where she went a little weird on me, she said, don't get muzzled. She said, connect with media and voters in your own unique way. Her unique way, and this is where I had said, and I got a little bit of heat for it. If things go off the rails, Kamala could be the next Sarah Palin. In that if she dominates the spotlight and is allowed to go off into some fringe areas that I don't think she's going to, I really don't. That she could be crazy. She could be made out to be crazy like Palin. And Palin, clearly wanted to go crazy, wanted to go off on the deep end. And the media was more than happy to let her. Seriously. But I thought, some of the things that, the advice that she gave were good. It was solid advice, and it actually made her look human. And this is one of those moments where maybe even someone like Sarah Palin's going, we've gotten too crazy as a country. The fact that, we're this polarized, and this divided. Maybe the people who even got us here, because even at the end of his life, Lee Atwater looked around and said, I'm sorry, I screwed this up. Lee Atwater, obviously the, mastermind political consultant, ran incredible campaigns, was incredibly divisive. He was the guy who mentored, Turd Blossom, Karl Rove. And came out of the I think the Roy Cohn school. I mean, they were all in that kind of group. It's amazing when you sit and you look at the connections, just how small the universe in this country is, how small the political universe is. But look, I saw her speech today. I was left with some hope that maybe we can as a country pull together. And maybe, Joe Biden choosing a more moderate vice presidential running mate was the right thing to do. Now, I find it really incredible that the right has, jumped onto her. She's the most liberal ever, and basically painting her as the next communist, which is not even remotely close to the truth. But the truth and the Republican Party, they're they are two very different entities. But like I said, I've got some really great hope, and I got some, I sat down today, with some other really good hope. Yesterday I had this weird thing happen, and I get this occasionally where you'll be talking to somebody, and they'll go, I recognize you, I know you from somewhere. And I say, yeah, I get that a lot. He goes, no, yeah, your voice is really distinctive. I've heard you before. I know your voice. And I'm going, no, maybe, I don't know. And as we're talking, he goes, you're that guy on the radio. I go, yeah. Because, to be honest, I didn't want to get into what could have been, a confrontation, an argument, deep, divisive conversation. He goes, I love your show. And I'm like, oh, that's nice. Thank you. Because I'm almost one of those people who cannot take a compliment. In fact, I am one of those people who, it's impossible for me to take a compliment. And he goes, I heard a couple of weeks ago you talking about China and talking about, this. And he goes, I looked into it. And then he went on this long dissertation of all of the things that he had looked into based on one thing that I had talked about. And it was like one of these moments where I go, maybe there is hope. Maybe there are people who, they want to find the facts. And he goes, it's even worse than you made it out to be. And I said, yeah, it probably is. And he went into the whole, because if you remember, we had been talking about, the metro cars and the Chinese taking over the rail cars, the transit cars and the manufacturing of them. I mean, basically they're making them at a cost that, Bombardier and, some of the U.S. manufacturers can't even buy the materials for. I mean, they're heavily subsidizing to that point. And what they're doing is, and smartly on their side, is they're dominating the industry. And it's not just the car itself. It's not just, assembling the transit car. It's the supply chain. And this is where this guy went into this. He goes, there are U.S. companies that are being bought up. And I go, yeah, this is what they did with auto parts. It's what they've done with every industry that they've chosen. It's not just that they're going after the rail cars. It's they're going after the steel manufacturers, the people who fabricate the panels, the people who make the rivets, the people who put the flooring in, the people who make the pipes. It's the entire supply chain from start to finish. They're not looking at just, hey, we're going to dominate the rail car market. We want to dominate the entire supply chain. And this guy, based off this one conversation, that I'd had a couple of weeks ago, he went and he looked into all this stuff, and he was naming companies. I mean, I was like, yeah, I wanted to hire him as a researcher because, he was going through, this company's been bought out and this company's owned by this hedge fund. And I was like, wow, all of this came from, one conversation. And I'll tell you, it gave me some really, really great hope that maybe the BS that's being slung at us from Trump and all of the political class, maybe now we've taken, I'm hoping, to doing a little bit more of our own work. Because I've said for a long time, the problems in D.C., the problems in Harrisburg, the problems in state houses across this country are really, problems that we, the voters, have created. We've allowed ourselves, or we've, been duped, or maybe this is just who we are. But we've created a class of politician that doesn't seem to care about what we want and what we need. It's more about scoring political victories. It's more about, how did my team do? Because I'll tell you, one of the things that infuriates me is when someone says, well, you got to come over to the red team. And I'm like, this isn't team sport. I don't believe in this as team sport mentality. I believe our government should be run to do the things that we want collectively done that we can't do individually. That's what our government is. Government decides who gets what. And sadly, the reason the working class of this country is so ticked off most of the time is because we haven't been getting anything. Wages have been declining and stagnating. Health insurance is getting harder to hold on to and more expensive and more elusive to use. Retirement benefits are going, and now you've got this no stimulus plan to help people in their hour of need. So you go, well, we bailed out the big corporations with a $500 billion trough. What about the guy working at the local whatever mart, or the guy working at the trucking company, or wherever? They don't seem to care about that. And that's our fault. Because somehow they've not been afraid of our vote. Because it's that team sport mentality. My team's going to win. And granted, I've had this conversation with people. I'm not fond of Donald Trump, but I got to vote for him because he's on my team. Trump is a clear and present danger, has to go. And I'm hoping that the Republicans wake up to that it's no longer about team. The only team that matters is this country. And 4 more years of Donald Trump, look, $2.8 trillion budget deficit. 1 year. And yet not a word from the people who wanted to allow our economy in 2009 to collapse even further. It's amazing stuff to me. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. But it was a great conversation, and thank you for that. It was rejuvenative, to say the least, to hear something positive. I was waiting for "I hate you," which I get occasionally as well. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
There's nothing more American than workers standing up, and the union gives them voice to win. On the Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1955. That was the day Teamsters organizer, 28-year-old William Grammy, was kidnapped and beaten. Grammy had arrived in Sebastopol, California to help organize about 350 workers in local canneries, drying plants, and fruit sheds. The Teamsters had been on campaign footing for months in an attempt to win union recognition, higher wages, better working conditions, and benefits. They had lost a union representation election the previous fall after Sebastopol apple growers moved quickly to lay off union supporters. By January, cannery workers at Oscar Hall & Sons voted for union representation. The workers at Barlow Company would vote against the union just 2 months later. But by early August, the strike wave hit. Workers walked off the job at the Sebastopol Cooperative Cannery. More at 7 other area canneries joined them on strike in the days that followed. Grammy would later testify that he had heard reports weeks earlier of a grower threatening to have him killed within 3 hours should any strike actually take place. During the strike that would ultimately prove victorious, 3 men kidnapped Grammy outside the union's hall. He was driven along a rural road, tied to a pole, gagged, and beaten with a bicycle chain. Left for dead, he was found the next day and hospitalized immediately. But the union and the strikers remained undeterred. Before the strike was over, scab trucks attempting to haul apples to market were vandalized and burned, and scab drivers were beaten. 8 months later, the apple industry finally came to the negotiating table. By May of 1956, apple growers signed with the Teamsters. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So what's amazing is this Friday is going to be the 85th anniversary of Franklin Roosevelt signing the Social Security Act, and we've got a president who has signed an executive order to kill it. So, good. It lasted 85 years, and, my grandmother and grandfather, they lived dignified retirements until their passing. They got their a little bit of Social Security, a little bit of defined benefit pension from their union jobs, a little bit of savings. They lived their lives throughout in their homes, lived respectfully, and didn't want for anything in their old age. That's probably going to go away. The rest of us are going to see, I think, very, very bad retirements. The tsunami is coming, and if Trump gets away with what he's proposing, bad times for the future. And here to share some thoughts on that, I've asked our good friend Helene Olin to come back and talk with us. She's an opinion writer over at the Washington Post. She's got a new piece out today on Trump's executive order. Helene, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, thank you for having me on, as always.
So am I being hyperbolic of the fact that, with Trump's executive order to give us a payroll tax holiday, just hold it off, that this is the beginning of the end for our beloved Social Security?
I don't know if it's the end, but it's a real problem. I mean, essentially what Trump did was he signed an executive order of, by the way, dubious constitutionality, and that's not a left-wing position. Ben Sasse said it, so I hardly think of him as like a friend of the left.
Right.
That would suspend the payroll tax for both employer and employee through the end of the year. Okay. When I say suspend, I don't mean you are forgiven it for perpetual. You would have to pay it back. It's not totally clear when, but probably minus legislation, and this is where we get to the threat part. Probably April 15th, 2021.
Right.
Okay. But definitely April 15th of some year here. So there'd have to be legislation. So right now, what Trump's basically doing is passing something off, again, that might or might not be legal, but putting Democrats, of course, in the position of having to take it to court, of saying, here, the money's due, who's going to have it? So do you forgive it? And if you do forgive it, and there'll be pressure to forgive it, you start going down a real slippery slope really fast, because then you could start justifying all sorts of other cuts to Social Security in the name of, quote, saving it. So it's kind of this poison chalice, right? Trump can say, well, not my fault, if he's elected or not, if he's reelected or not reelected.
Right.
I mean, he's basically leaving, it's a poison chalice for the Democrats, and it's a terrible position, and it also just demonstrates what a showman he is, and also what a con artist. Because who ran for president saying, I'll be the guy to save Social Security and Medicare? Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And he has reiterated that constantly, even as he's made various small cuts to the disability fund. And, it's been a con from the beginning. And we know it's been a con from the beginning because one of his campaign aides said it was a con right in 2016. And more recently, at Davos this year, Trump said, when he was queried by CNBC, that he was definitely considering looking at entitlements after the 2020 election.
Yeah, there's no surprise there, because this has been a Republican, it's been on their wet dream list for a very long time, killing off Social Security. And, it's that mentality of we're saving it by killing it. I always love that mentality. Well, we've got to do these horrible things or else how are we going to save it?
Right. And what makes it so particularly horrible at this point is people like me have said we're on the verge of a retirement crisis for a long time, that the Social Security replacement rate is lower, there's less in the way of pensions, people don't have enough money saved for retirement, right? This has been kind of the slow-moving disaster heading our way. Well, now we are in a massive disaster. People over the age of 55 are losing their jobs left and right. There's some evidence that they are losing them disproportionately. There's roughly, a number are starting to claim they are out of the workforce entirely, much more so than people who are younger than them. And we know from the past, when I say the past, I mean the Great Recession, that when people said that and they were above the age of 55, they did indeed often file for Social Security at 62 or thereabouts. When you file at 62, you get less money. So you're going into retirement with less money. Typical 401k, of which only about half people have them, of somebody over the age of 55 has less than $100,000 in it. These people have to get by for decades, hopefully. And what are they going to do? So Donald Trump has given Social Security a raspberry of a birthday gift, because Friday is the 85th anniversary of when FDR signed the Social Security Act, the legislation starting the program.
So what do you say to the person, though, Helene, who goes, well, Barack Obama did this. He did the same thing. Barack Obama did the same thing. And Social Security's fine.
Well, first of all, I wish Barack Obama hadn't done it. So the one thing about payroll tax cuts is the idea is that in a recessionary environment, they stimulate the economy, right? Because a tax cut is a tax cut. And that was a justification under Obama, which, for the record, was forced on him by the Republicans as part of a deal to get more aid out there. But that's actually not our problem right now. We don't have a problem of people having enough money, believe it or not, who have jobs, okay? People who have jobs actually have more money than they can spend right now, because the economy is half shut down. So they don't need more money to encourage them to spend. The people who need the money of the payroll tax cut aren't getting it.
Right.
Why? Because you need a paycheck to get a payroll tax cut, and they don't have a paycheck. So this is a basic logic problem. Trump has sort of had a bug about the payroll tax cut forever. No one is quite sure why, because it's not something that somebody worth $10 billion should really notice, because your income that is taxed for Social Security is capped at $137,000, a little more than $137,000. Presumably, he pays that within a day or two of the new year every year if he's worth $10 billion.
Yeah, I mean, that isn't it. But to go back to the Obama thing, they actually did pay for that tax cut, though. They did allocate the money back to Social Security. So it didn't blow a hole in the middle of it.
No,
And
it
that,
did not.
and that's the
But it
thing.
still shouldn't have happened.
Yeah,
But
no, I agree. I mean, we should have done a whole bunch of other things, but I got to put that out there. What Trump is doing is completely different than what Obama did. Obama, they paid for it. Trump's just saying we're going to blow this hole in the middle of it, and hey, if you reelect me, you get to keep the money. Very short-sightedly thinking that that this is going to be the poison pill that ultimately I think it will do Social Security in.
Right. Well, he's also saying he'd like to terminate the payroll tax entirely. I should have said that at the beginning. I mean, we know where this is going. And it's just, Trump is a con man. And the thing is he's not even really smart enough to hide the con. It's here he said, I'm going to save Social Security. Here he said, I'm going to cut the payroll tax cap. Therefore, how are you going to save Social Security if there's no money coming in?
No, it's a good point, but here's the thing: I don't think his supporters care one way or another about what the details are of what he says. They just idolize him, and it doesn't matter what he's going to do. And this is one of those issues that surprisingly, I haven't heard as much blowback as you would think that you would hear.
I think it's just buried in everything else right now.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact is, as Trump, his support is disproportionately seniors. Seniors are starting to move away from him for the rather common sense reason that they are the most likely victims of COVID-19. So Trump has literally let an epidemic flourish with no testing, no intelligent discussion about treatments. We all know the famous bleach episode. That is actually targeting one of his bases, which is people over the age of 65. So, this is just another knife in them, basically. And I do believe they will eventually notice it. I mean, this is actually a step above the usual. One of the things Republicans do when they usually threaten at Social Security, they say, oh, well, we'll make the changes for people under 55, right? So that people don't really perceive it as their problem. Because, of course, people under 55, A, never think they're going to retire, B, never think they're going to be the person without the money, and they never see themselves as older, right? Whereas people over 55 immediately get frightened. And, have this, instinct of, wait a second, you're coming for me. This isn't even play pretend where I'm going to cut it only for, for under people under 55. It's fairly obvious where this is going to go.
Yeah, it's going to go after, the people on it now.
In fact, right. Just a bad idea this is. There's very little Republican support for cutting the payroll tax, because they know that this is, a major issue for their constituency.
Yeah. But what do you say to the person? Because I got hit with this the other day, who said, we should just eliminate the payroll tax completely, because that's not how we really fund Social Security. In fact, I had a listener send me an article that the Roosevelt Institute came out with that said that we actually don't fund Social Security through this payroll tax. Which I thought was kind of interesting, because I have always believed that's what it was for. Now, they made the argument that there's no, Al Gore lockbox, and there's no actual trust fund, and there's none of this stuff, that Congress allocates money for it. What do you say to those folks?
Well, there is, a trust fund. That's the fact of the matter. And second, the moment you make Social Security part of the general fund, which it could happen, by the way, I mean, there's nothing to stop it. The issue is it becomes a program for poor people. We know that because every program that's funded that way, think food stamps, is seen that way. Medicare, which is not funded that way, is also not seen that way. Okay, you have to have universal benefits paid for by a dedicated stream in this country. That's just how the United States is, for better or for worse.
Right. So, you brought up a moment ago, that older workers are disproportionately being, sent to the curb. You would think in this moment, that, knowing that, people are losing their health care, losing their jobs, and the tsunami of all the bad that's coming, retirement being, far down the list at this moment, that we would be moving towards maybe even lowering the Medicare age and the Medicaid, the Social Security age, to give people an opportunity to transition out of the workplace, open up jobs for younger people to take those jobs, and kind of use this crisis as a transition point, instead of trying to figure out how to make people who are currently collecting Social Security have to go back into the workplace to figure out how to survive.
Exactly. And actually, that's one of the things that people don't realize about the creation of the original Social Security. That is actually one of the reasons it was created. it wasn't simply that elderly people were ending up in the streets if they, when they were too old to work, which was indeed true. But it was also the fact that Franklin Roosevelt did indeed want to encourage them to leave the workforce to open up jobs for younger people. That is absolutely correct. And this is a good thing. And, the fact of the matter is that even if people do want to work, age discrimination is extremely powerful. And the people who lose their jobs past the age of 50, 55, which is, by the way, the majority of people at some point, most people do indeed retire earlier than they think, and usually against their will, do not get hired back at the same rates. They do not replace their salary. I mean, it's the numbers and figures on this are absolutely staggering. I've actually written about this several times.
Yeah, well, we could always get that job as the Walmart greeter. That's always available, right?
It's only available when there aren't other people to fill it. Even, not, I don't want to say Walmart particularly, but the fact is right now, there's people who have or older don't necessarily want to take those jobs, and they don't want to take them for a damn good reason. Somebody who's 70 years old probably should not be working as a Walmart greeter right now. That's probably a really bad idea.
Yeah, that's a bad career choice. You're probably right, because you end up getting the COVID, and then no benefits. Not good stuff. So, let me ask you: is there a way forward for the Democrats in this? Because I'm reading these articles that are saying that the Republicans think that they've got the upper hand here. We've got the Democrats in a pickle, I guess was what Trump had said. So this has become a political football now. The lives of millions of people who, have gone over the unemployment cliff, the people who are potentially going to lose their homes. You see anything good coming out of any of this?
One hopes the Republicans will feel the pressure to act. That at some point it will occur to them that they will definitely lose a number of Senate and House seats if their constituents don't have money. I mean, we have an extremely high unemployment rate right now. People need money. There's no question about this. On the other hand, the negative side of this, two other things could be going on. Polling shows, that was released today actually, that people actually blame both sides equally, which is a constant issue. And second, it's possible the Republicans figure Trump's toast at this point and are just trying to leave, again, a poison chalice for Biden at this point. Skunk the economy and make it Biden's problem, which is exactly what happened in 2009, truthfully.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And this is, what I had predicted a while ago. I said, look, they're going to, from this point forward, they're going scorched earth. So that, over the first 2 years of Biden's term, he's just trying to figure out what's wrong and clean up the mess and shovel out. And in 2 years, they'll probably take the Senate back and, maybe even the House. And we end up in the kind of gridlock we saw, well, obviously in 2010 that brought us the Tea Party. Only now I see the Tea Party getting crazier with these QAnon kooks.
Oh, the QAnon stuff is absolutely insane. The child trafficking protests are just the latest bit of craziness that are just sort of astonishing.
They're just amazing. Last thing I wanted to ask you about, obviously yesterday, the big announcement of Kamala Harris as the VP choice. Today, I don't know if you watched the speech. I thought she did an incredible job. I wanted to get your thoughts before I let you go.
I thought she was amazing. She stuck it to Trump. She's energetic. She really is a charismatic figure. I actually think it was probably the right choice in the end. I think people know, I'm fairly progressive and, certainly more progressive than Harris, but I really do think she was the right call by Biden. She, compliments him in a huge number of ways. And, I was beyond bowled over by her appearance today.
Yeah, I thought she did a really good job of being extremely likable and upbeat and obviously addressing some places where there might be some concern and division. I thought she did a great job right out of the gate. And look, they're raising a boatload of money off of it.
Exactly.
Yeah, so we'll see how this goes. But as I said yesterday, it wasn't my first choice, but she is now, because come November, that's who I'm voting for. But Helene, I appreciate the time. As always, great stuff. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you for having me on.
our good friend Helene Olin. She's one of the better opinion writers over there at the Washington Post. Make sure you check out her piece titled Trump's Latest Social Security Con. We'll make sure we get links out at the ricksmithshow.com. Let's take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1919. That was the day that the chorus girls of the Ziegfeld Follies formed a union. They called their organization the Chorus Equity Association. The Ziegfeld Follies were the hottest ticket on Broadway during the early 1900s. The show was most famous for their chorus girls in elaborate costumes, bedecked with feathers and sparkles. In 1919, performers on Broadway as well as Chicago were standing up for fairer wages and better treatment on the job. The Actors Equity Association's contract had expired, and the actors demanded a fair contract. The producers banded together into the Producing Managers Association. Actors and producers faced off. The actors held a meeting and decided not to go on stage unless the contract was settled. Membership in the union swelled. 12 shows in New York alone were canceled. When Florence Ziegfeld, the head of the Ziegfeld Follies, joined the producers group, the chorus girls took this as a bad sign. They decided it was time they, too, joined the union movement. A former chorus girl named Marie Dressler was elected the first union president. The chorus girls joined the striking actors for a march down Broadway. The Ziegfeld performers formally went out on strike, and the curtain fell on the Follies. Chicago theaters also went dark. In all, 37 productions were shut down in the two cities. Finally, on September 7th, the strike was settled and the Follies returned. In 1955, Chorus Equity merged with the Actors Equity Association.
Here's to the beautiful ladies.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I remember it as a kid growing up in high school. I remember the date, August 5th, 1981. Reagan fires the Patco workers. And what I've said is the shot heard across the boardroom, and what I liken to the beginning of open season on organized labor. Now understand, for years before that, the attacks on organized labor had been raging. You go back, to the passage of Taft-Hartley over Harry Truman's veto and all of the attacks that came from that point forward. But that moment, firing the Patco workers was the official moment where corporate America said, now's time, it's open season. And I'm glad to see that there's a new documentary out about this. It's called The Last Strike. And I've got the director here on the line. Ray Novoselsky is one of the two directors of this film. Ray, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, thank you for having me on. Really appreciate it.
So, I'm thrilled to see that, someone has taken a look at this moment in our history and in the history of labor in this country, because I think this is such an important time and an important thing to remember and really to go back and somehow figure out how to deal with.
Yeah. I mean, part of what we were looking at, we came up with this idea in 2017 and couldn't believe that nobody had ever told this story. And, part of this was this idea of what had happened to working people, but also what had happened to the labor movement. And I grew up with a couple of really tough as nails union uncles who also happened to be Democrats. And I had this sort of idea of what a liberal was and what a pro-union person was that's very different than this concept of the snowflake. These are very tough people who fought for what they wanted. And that was something where we saw this story about these 11,000 people who went up against the federal government trying to get better wages, trying to get shorter work hours, trying to get retirement before they burnt out and accidentally caused the plane to crash. All these very reasonable things, found themselves going up against the newly rising conservative movement under the face of it, Ronald Reagan, and found themselves quickly crushed in really a very unfair and just kind of mean-spirited way that started this era of strike breaking, as you mentioned.
Yeah, and in a very public way. And one of the things that to go back to your point, the strikes are basically always about wages, hours, conditions. And
Right.
you hear some of the stories, and I've talked to a number of those workers who got fired. And not only were they fired, they were banned from federal employment for life. So it wasn't just bad enough that they fired them. They took their ability to make a living completely away from them to work for the federal government, which again was another step of nastiness or meanness, if you want to put it that way.
Well, and at the time, a lot of them were the sole breadwinners for their middle class families,
Right.
and so to take away, air traffic control is not exactly something you just come in off the street and start doing. So there was a lot of training, there was years of experience. And these people considered themselves professional air traffic controllers. And to have one's profession taken away, or the ability to get any other government job when you've been maybe a government worker your entire career is, it's a major blow for someone at 35, 40 years old, which was the average age of the person who got, the 11,000 that got fired.
Right, but more importantly, what it was that message for anyone else that dare step forward and speak
Yeah.
out. And this is the kind of spitefulness and retribution you see not just from the Reagan era, but from corporate America here this point forward. It
But
really
see, the
became
thing-
warfare.
The thing that I found so amazing in looking at this was I assumed this was, it was definitely a controversial move, and there was certainly a sector of Americans that were against this. But all told, polls showed this to be one of the most popular moves that Ronald Reagan made during his 8 years in office. And so there was this mystery as to why the American people had come to see their fellow workers, these air traffic controllers, as forsakable, and not just forsakable, but to actually cheer when they were crushed. Like, what had happened to us that made us so willing to go for Ronald Reagan over our own interests, over our fellow workers. And that's kind of what we explore in this film.
And what did you come out with? Because I've said for years it's my belief that the labor movement dropped the ball. I believe Lane Kirkland was more interested in supporting the Solidarity movement in Poland than he was the Patco workers in Washington. So
Right.
I'm curious where you guys come down on.
Well, I grew up with my father always telling me, sometimes apropos of nothing, he would bring up this strike, because I was born a week into Ronald Reagan's presidency. Now, my other director, Danny Alpert, is a little more of the era, Danny out of the Kindling Group, which has really backed and fostered this. But my dad always talked about it in this kind of legendary way where he said, every union, every working person in the country should have come out in solidarity for a general strike with these, workers, and they could have brought Reagan to his knees, brought him back to the negotiating table, forced them, and maybe we would have seen a very different outcome for the labor movement over the last 40 years, and maybe income inequality wouldn't be what it is. Maybe corporate power and lobbying and their hold over our government wouldn't be, as strong. What did we come to? Honestly, it's still in progress, and I don't like putting the cart before the horse. You got to go down the journey and find the answers before.
No, and I can't wait to see the film. To be honest with you, I can't wait to see it. How do we get to see it?
Yeah, well, we're going to have it done in time for the 40th anniversary, which is August of 2021, so next year. So we've launched a Kickstarter, and I couldn't be more bowled over by the enthusiasm that it's gotten. We reached half our goal within the first 3 days. We now have 21 days left, and I hope your listeners will go give it watch our video, come meet Danny and I, and come find, watch some clips and see what we're up to. If they look up The Last Strike on Kickstarter, they'll find it. And we're about 9,000 from our goal with 21 days left. So we'll be dropping some clips so people can at least follow clips by following our Facebook page or continue to tune into the Kickstarter. And within a year, with everyone's support, we'll have this out and ready to view.
I'm looking forward to it, and we'll make sure that we get links out on social media and how folks can take a look at that and hopefully donate to it, because I think it's an incredible project. Have you guys looked into, or are you going to look into the fact that maybe part of the division was that the PATCO union actually supported Reagan in the election in 1980? Because there was a massive division of labor in that election. Obviously, the Teamsters supported Reagan as well. Obviously, the airlines and the trucking industry very angry over deregulation. Any thought into that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that was a very interesting thing to discover. In fact, what had happened was when there was a pre-version of the air traffic control strike, it was a massive sick-out that happened in 1970 under Nixon. And while 70 of the strikers were fired at the time, they were able to, Nixon eventually welcomed them into a negotiation in which he finally agreed to bring all of those sort of pre-strikers back and also give them some of the things they've been fighting for. And so I think they had and they ended up endorsing Nixon in 72. So there'd been a precedent where they, had backed a conservative, and it had actually paid off for them. So they'd been having trouble with the FAA under, Jimmy Carter. And so they thought, well, maybe this guy being the only presidential candidate to ever be the head of a union, the Screen Actors Guild, promising he's going to shoot fair with the working man with unions. And he, maybe this guy would give us a shot. And we actually found a rare clip of Bob Poli, the head of the Air Traffic Controllers Union, meeting with Reagan in 1980, and the two of them announcing that PATCO was going to endorse. We've talked with interviewed a number of people on the inside, including one of the board members who was the only holdout who said he would not endorse Reagan no matter what, but he wasn't going to stand against them, but he was fairly certain that Reagan was going to sell him down, the river. And Reagan gave them this letter that they famously all like to point to and hold up, in which he states that he's going to fix some of these, work with them to fix some of the issues around, air travel safety that they were so concerned about under Carter, and, that he was going to shoot straight with them, that they were going to be partners in the process. And then promptly after being elected, sort of appears to have shut them out. They were never able to get really another personal meeting with Reagan after he got into office. And so there's a theory, actually, that part of the reason they went on strike was because Bob Poli, the president of the union, said he had to throw a brick through the White House window to get Reagan's attention, but they felt then they would end up in a real negotiation. And, of course, it didn't.
Yeah, it didn't work out that way. And there had been the comments that I've had people tell me, because I've read the letter, and you're right. They all point to it as this is what the hope was, and there were also some supposedly assurances given that they would be working together, and that when they went on strike, they wouldn't fire them. And it became one of these moments where it was, well, now that they're out in the streets, now they can't go back. Again, it was one of these interesting moments. It's like,
it might have ended up that's one of the more interesting things, is it could have ended up all kinds of different ways. But once Reagan, and we're still trying to get to the bottom of this, and we're talking with a lot of Reagan insiders, but once Reagan decides to go out into the Rose Garden and give that come back within 48 hours or you're all fired thing, presidential precedent said that there was no way he could back down. He couldn't just turn after that. And so it painted everyone into a corner, and we really focused heavily on that 48-hour period. What's astounding is how few people went back. They all counted down to Reagan's deadline while holding hands and cheering on their various strike lines. And as was told to us by the head of the reformed PATCO union, Ron Taylor, I mean, this is really the only strike that you can point to that's coast to coast, that's from Puerto Rico to Hawaii, from the rural areas of America to the cities disaffected, the entire country. And for 11,000 people to stand in solidarity as they got fired forever from their careers, it's an amazing story. It's very inspiring in some ways.
And I think one that's important in this moment where we're such a divided country, to have that kind of solidarity and that kind of stick-to-itiveness. I think it's a good story.
Well, that word solidarity has gone out of vogue too. You don't really hear that being. I mean, it's coming back a little, but it's not a buzz term among the young progressive left anymore. And that was something we wanted to change with this film, is to restart the conversation, put unionism and solidarity right up there with other perfectly great causes like Black Lives Matter, like Time's Up, like climate change, and have it be part of the progressive conversation, unionism.
Well,
labor.
for me, as someone who, I'm a working class liberal. For me, the union movement is at any given time the most important movement, because if you can't afford to participate, if you don't have the economics to play in the game, you don't get to play.
Yeah. Well, the other people we wanted to reach with this film were, frankly, Trumpers. We wondered, you look at the demographic of the people who went on strike, and it is predominantly middle-aged white men from 1981, and they are former Vietnam vets. Many of them, most of them, served in the military. They had a crazy sense of humor. They were un-PC. They pretty much fit the description of what you would assume would be Trump's base now. And there's this sort of I don't know, they're there as this way to see what these working people once stood for, and how far. Basically, it's a fool me once, shame on me, situation where, they fell for Reagan, and here's what happened. And I don't know, it's a good hard look in the mirror.
I got to tell you, I'm looking forward to it. And I hope folks will make a donation. Go to Kickstarter, look up The Last Strike. We'll get links out on our social media. Throw a couple of bucks your way. I can't wait to see the film.
Thank you, good sir. I
Good stuff. Ray, I appreciate the time. I'd love to have you come back as you get closer to release date and let us know.
Let's do it. All right. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks so much. Ray Novoselsky, the director of The Last Strike. And like I said, we'll get some links out. Hopefully folks will throw them a couple of bucks and we can get this thing seen and made and seen. Good stuff. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1881. That was the day the United Brotherhood of Carpenters and Joiners passed their first constitution at a meeting in Chicago. The meeting was organized by Peter J. McGuire. McGuire grew up on the Lower East Side of New York City. He became a well-known labor speaker and is credited with helping to found the Labor Day holiday. Representatives from 11 cities answered McGuire's call and came to Chicago. For 4 days, they debated and discussed their vision for a new union. In the end, they completed a constitution and general structure. They nominated McGuire as their first general secretary. At its founding, the new union had just over 2,000 members. It grew slowly, not even reaching 6,000 by 1885. Yet the union leaders remained determined. McGuire logged 18-hour days traveling to different cities, speaking, writing, and promoting the union cause. Then, in 1886, came the nationwide push for the 8-hour workday. On May 1st, carpenters marched in the streets with fellow workers in major cities across the nation. By 1890, union membership had grown to more than 50,000. By the time of the Carpenters' Convention in 1914, held in Indianapolis, the union boasted more than 261,000 members. The union's general secretary addressed the convention that day by looking back on what had been accomplished. He said, "Our organization today is something to be proud of. They never imagined for a moment that they would have an organization such as we have and accomplish as much as we have accomplished. Today, the Brotherhood includes more than 500,000 members." Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So some hope. I've been calling for this. I've been waiting for a lawmaker to come out and say, we need to save the United States Postal Service. We need to undo the damage that Trump has done and that they're doing. I mean, look, the idea that And it's just one of these weird moments. The idea that in a moment of global pandemic, in a moment of an airborne pathogen, killing 165,000 people and infecting more than 5 million, that you'd kind of want to do what you can do to make sure that we don't have lines of people crammed into a certain area. And voting seems to be one of those areas where you go, in this moment, vote by mail seems to make sense. It does. Seems pretty simple to me. It seems like something that you would want. And especially, if I were Trump, because, if I'm him, I want older voters to participate. I don't want them to stay away because, hey, I could die from this. Look, younger voters, the folks who are motivated to get Trump out, they might be willing to go to the polls and risk getting sick because, they mostly get through it. It's those older voters. It's the angry old voter who that's the Trump base. And what's interesting is, talking to Ray, about the Patco strike, I remember those days. And I remember, people on both sides. I remember, again, people going, no, Reagan was tough and he put them in their place, until they realized what those guys were fighting for. The air traffic control system was so badly antiquated. Air traffic was really unsafe, especially as they knew it was going to explode. Back then, air traffic wasn't nearly as bad as it is today, and because it was expensive. As had they not upgraded and had they not, fought for those improvements, we'd still be, using, the old vacuum tube computers. And as the one guy, and I remember the conversation, it's been about 10 years since I talked to the guy, but as he was a Patco worker, and he said, look, you would lose planes. You would, the equipment would, something would burn out and you would lose stuff, and you had to, in your mind, keep track of where people were because the equipment was unreliable. And he said, you were working all these hours and it was such a high stress job. I mean, imagine for a moment how stressful it is to know you've got 10 planes in the air and they're all within, the possibility of, doing 300, 400, 500 miles an hour of coming together at some point where you've got, 100, 200, 300 people on a plane. So you're responsible for as much as, 3,000 lives in the air. And one mistake, it's over. It's catastrophic. And the equipment that you have, you can't rely on. I mean, in the picture that he painted me was remarkable. And, out of that strike, they did get rid of all that antiquated stuff. You don't hear that part of the story. Almost immediately right after that, they came in and they brought all new technology in, which was exactly what these guys were fighting for. And as the story was told to me by people who were involved in it, Reagan had given them the assurance that he wouldn't do what he did. He wanted to put, the union wanted to push for, not just better wages, but shorter hours and better equipment, better conditions, because it was a high burnout, high stress job. You had guys in your 40s and early 50s burning out. And they wanted to make a little bit better work-life balance. They were trying to make it a better environment. And what you had is you saw an opportunist in Reagan who, quite happily was willing to send them to the curb. Because understand, until that point, there had been some major strikes in the U.S. The 1970s saw a lot. My grandparents' generation, they were ready to strike at the drop of a hat. Literally at the drop of a hat. And I remember the old-timer who, the first union job I got, he said, the second I turn my hat backwards, the day is over. We've got a problem and we're going to deal with it right now. Because those guys were tough. And he's right. Ray's right. They were not PC. They were not people you fooled around with. They were people who, if you didn't do what you were supposed to do, they'd smack you, put you in the line. We don't have those folks anymore. Sadly. And what we've got is a employment situation that is back to what it was, a master and servant relationship. And that's why, sadly, I think we've lost that militancy. And hopefully films like his will help us rediscover and re-engage and find our solidarity. That's simple. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
In this horrible time of economic collapse, it is truly touching to see so many corporate chieftains reaching out in solidarity with a hard-hit working class. We know they're doing this because they keep telling us they are. Practically every brand-name giant has been spending millions of dollars on PR campaigns in recent weeks, asserting that they're standing with us, declaring over and over, "We're all in this together." Except, of course, they're really not standing anywhere near us. While we're waiting in endless lines at food banks and unemployment offices, the elites are still getting fat paychecks and platinum-level health care. The severity and gross disparity of our country's present economic collapse is not simply caused by a sudden viral outbreak, but by a decades-long plutocratic policy of intentionally maximizing profits for the rich and minimizing everyone else's well-being. As the eminent economist Joseph Stiglitz rightly put it, we built an economy with no shock absorbers. Jobs, once the measure of a family's economic security, have steadily been shriveled to low-wage, unreliable work, untethered to a fair share, or any share, of the new wealth that workers create. In a relentless push for exorbitant short-term profits, today's executives have abandoned any pretense that a corporation is a community of interdependent interests striving to advance the common good. Instead, while the honchos are richly covered, they're washing their hands of any responsibility for the health, retirement, and other essential needs of their workforce. Rely on food stamps and other publicly funded programs, they say, even as their lobbyists and for-sale lawmakers slash the public safety net. This is Jim Hightower saying these forces of American greed have shoved millions of working families to the economic precipice, and all it takes is a virus to push them over.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So we're seeing stories across the country of schools reopening and like the one in Georgia quickly closing. And as the coming weeks pass and more schools open up and more school districts decide how they're going to deal with, are they going to have classroom activities? Are they not? For me, the answer lies in the people who are in the front of the classrooms, whether it's going to be physically in that classroom or, well, on the other end of the computer line that my kids see. And the reality is if it weren't for the teachers, those people who my kids adore, I don't know that it would have gotten through the last bit of insanity, which is why I think it's so important to give teachers the credit that they deserve and stop with the attacks, which is why I've asked Christine Vaccaro to come talk with us. She's a New York teacher, also a contributor over at the Badass Teacher Association website. She's got a new piece out, Why Rebranding Teachers Will Save Lives. Christine, thanks for taking time for us.
Hi, Rick. So nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
So what do you mean rebranding? I get the whole, teachers are the saviors, are going to make our kids wonderful, or they're lazy slackers who are just collecting a paycheck. So what are we rebranding to?
Well, I think the issue is that this idea of savior has become so entrenched that teachers themselves have kind of bought into that hype. And so we have teachers who, even in this moment where their lives, their families' lives, their communities' lives depend on keeping the schools closed, really, in order to stay safe as possible, they're not able to stand up and say, we can't do this. There's teachers lining up to go back into buildings, buy their own PPE, not willing to sort of say, no, we're not going to do this, and not enough of us anyway. So that brand has actually been very problematic in terms of being able to get people to stand up. The other reason it's problematic is that the public, it enables the public to kind of make us the boogeymen in all this. And as you mentioned, and as I've seen for the whole entire summer, the normal kind of anger or frustration that people level at teachers has intensified to such a degree that it's insane. I saw yesterday a radio station in Rochester had like a poll up on Facebook. Teachers who don't want to buy their own supplies, justified or jerks. It's like we at this point in time are so expected to use our own money, to do all these things, to sacrifice ourselves, that it's actually it's laughable at this point.
Yeah, I mean, the jerk is whoever came up with that poll.
I made that known on their website.
Yeah, I mean, there's someone whoever typed those words needs to get smacked. Let's have that. Let's have that poll. How many people think that the person who wrote that should get smacked?
Totally.
When I was in school, I know they don't do corporal punishment anymore, but we had a principal who had a baseball bat paddle. I'd break him out and his paddle on whoever wrote that.
Thank you. Yes, that's exactly how I feel.
But here's the thing. I mean, the sad reality is teachers have taken a brunt of a lot of the problems in society that they have no control over. The last bit, because I've heard people complain, well, the teachers didn't do enough, or this or that, hey, I need to get the kids back to school because the teachers are just babysitters, which all unfair.
Absolutely. I mean, the babysitter argument is I think really the most offensive one. In terms of a couple of things, I'm not unsympathetic to the fact that schools do serve as de facto childcare because of the fact that our economy creates that need. We don't give enough living wages. Parents need to work 2 jobs. So we don't have the societal structures in place to say, okay, we have these other childcare options. So that it's problematic on a larger scale, but for teachers in most states who require a graduate degree, in most states, in order to get full certification, we're educated professionals. And again, that idea of what we do is sort of serving this service purpose, this customer service purpose, as opposed to being a integral lever in society. I mean, without educating your public, what are you doing?
Right.
And that disrespect is so intertwined in our narrative that we get to this point.
Yeah, it's amazing. And whenever I have someone tell me stuff like that, I go, we entrust our most precious resource, the future of our country and our children, to people who you're calling lazy slackers who are nothing but babysitters. If that were the case, wouldn't you want to rethink something about that? Maybe something. And well, my teachers are good. I love my teacher. It's all those other teachers that are bad.
Right. Exactly. And I think it's interesting with education, too. Education is pretty unique in the fact that everybody really feels entitled to have an opinion on it because they're either a parent or they have managed to get through 12 years of the public school system. But he really feels like they can weigh in, yet very few people actually understand what we do on a day-to-day level and how challenging it is. I mean, most of us do it because we love it. It's our passion. It's our vocation. We wouldn't want to do anything else. But there is nothing. And I've had the benefit of working other careers before teaching. So I can tell you that there is no other job that I've done or have ever heard from anybody else that requires the different parts of your soul and brain and everything else to be able to do it well. So it's especially frustrating when people who don't actually know or couldn't actually survive 5 minutes in a classroom making commentary about what we do.
Now, see, I fully understand. I am that person. I could not. I got 3 kids. I can barely control them, let alone 30 or 40 or some of them in Detroit 50. I don't know how teachers do it, but I'm glad that you do, and I give you guys the utmost credit because you deserve it. And when I hear things like should you have to buy your own supplies, that's one of those things just plain insane.
It's infuriating, and the thing is that there's so many of us, and out of nothing other than just pure good intentions, who are going to be doing just that to help with this situation. We're not going to actually be supplied the PPE we need. Some schools aren't even mandating it, yet you're going to have teachers who are going to be lining up and taking shower curtains and, buying their own filters for their classrooms and masks for their kids. I have a friend who was trying to order face shields for her class of first graders. It's insane. And the fact that we do this is because we do it because we care, but the fact that we do it enables us to continually be this object of derision and, just punching bags.
Yeah,
Really.
ultimately, you're at the bottom of the hill, and you know what they say about being at the bottom of the hill. All of that stuff rolls downhill.
Yep.
And you're the guys, you're the folks who catch it. And this is maybe one of those moments. And I'll tell you, I was so happy to hear Randy Weingarten say that all options are on the table this fall, and that there potentially you could see teachers striking over safety, which I think is something that has to happen.
I agree with you, and 100%. I am hopeful that we see some more urgency from our unions. At this point, they really need to be stronger, particularly in New York. In New York City, we are in some unique conditions. Our numbers are obviously much more contained and much more decreased than other parts of this country, but New York City has a number of unique factors to warrant us being closed. And first and foremost is just the population we have, the fact that we have such a large population. We're the largest school district in the country. We have a large population of children of color whom we know are much more likely to get sick, spread the virus, be hospitalized. We have most of our kids taking public transportation to and from school. We're surrounded by 3 international airports. There's a lot of issues there that make us need to close, and we have not had, to this point, strong enough union leadership to support that.
And the cautionary tale, I mean, I'm watching this story coming out of Georgia of this Cherokee County School District that, they were hell-bent on opening, and we all saw the pictures of, kids packed into these hallways without any protection equipment and without any masks or certainly not social distancing. And you go, this is a very large school district, but it's, in Georgia. This isn't New York City. And I can't imagine what a school, the size of a lot in New York, how they would handle the distancing requirements, because you're talking about smaller buildings, older buildings, antiquated, ventilation systems. There's just a whole lot of stuff that goes into, this that I don't know that anyone's prepared for.
You're not the only one who can't imagine it. Our own New York City leadership can't imagine it either. We don't still have a really clear plan of what it's going to look like in another 4 weeks. You bring up the HVAC systems and the ventilation. That's a huge issue, particularly, again, in New York City, where buildings are decades and decades old. And we're in a huge budget crisis, just like a lot of other places. So the idea of actually being able to mitigate these systems, number one, effectively, number two, in time, is a fantasy. It's not going to happen. And you have, the actual, when you're talking about the actual number of kids and all of that, I don't see how it works out mathematically, and I don't see how people are actually going to be protected. Even if you did have a classroom where kids were managing to be 6 feet apart and, a certain number of people per square feet, you're still in the halls, you're still sharing facilities, bathrooms, hallways. I don't know how dismissal gets done in a way that would be socially distanced for schools across the city. There's just far too many unknowns, not enough plans, and certainly not enough leadership that teachers feel confident in.
Yeah, I mean, for me, there's, it had been thrown at me the idea of, we do the whole online thing. And basically, we just have this as a pause semester, a pause year even. Yeah. And then we start over next year. Because weirdly enough, the state of Pennsylvania, there's some legislation evidently going through that will give parents, and if it passes, I don't know yet, but it'll give parents the option to hold their kids back a year. Now, their stated reason is, well, if you had a kid who played sports and they're going to miss their senior year of high school football or whatever. So that was the angle. But I'm going, what? To be honest, I don't think the kids got everything they should have gotten last year. And I don't know that they're going to get what they need this year. Maybe a pause year isn't bad.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think also the idea that going remote, I think actually would have been the best thing to do from the beginning, and sort of being able to shore that process up and that procedure up, and be able to say, okay, let's put our time and resources into making, this isn't going to be a year that we're going to get really far. We have to sort of accept the fact that we're in a pandemic, things are not normal, and let's take a pause on everything and take the remote practice and make it so that it is better equipped to deal with, have students better prepared for it. So in other words, take your time and resources, put it into making sure every kid has the tech, making sure every kid has the Wi-Fi, making sure teachers have been adequately prepared to be able to launch better classroom platforms and everything else, and have us get some training in it. But the schools didn't want to make that call early enough to make that a viable option. And now you're going to have schools that did all this time and money to make these crazy hybrid ideas pivoting back to remote, and we're going to be no better prepared for it than we were back in spring when we were, building the airplane in the air, as the cliche kept being repeated over and over.
No,
again.
you're right, and this is exactly the conversation my wife and I have been having, over our kids in our school district, because they're going to a hybrid plan. Go 2 days, and then you do the rest of the work at home, and the other half of the class goes the other 2 days, and back and forth. And I'm going, they should have just planned, just do everything remotely for the first couple of months, and then have like a kind of a reopening. Because we know this thing in Georgia is a perfect example of
Correct.
It's just it starts with 1 or 2, and before you know it, now you're 1,100 people being quarantined, and it's just craziness. But I want to get back to your article for a second, because you say that rebranding is going to the rebranding of teachers is going to save lives, because you point out that they're being either in one hand being viewed as saviors, or those horrible slacker teachers. What's the rebrand? I mean, what do you want? How should teachers be viewed? What do teachers want to be viewed as?
Well, and I think it's actually a sort of a two-part plan in my head. Part one would be reframing the idea that caring for your students and being that dedicated professional means sacrificing yourself. At this moment, it would be really prudent to rebrand that into advocating for keeping our students safe, keeping our schools closed, keeping ourselves safe, keeping our families safe. So that's sort of the rebrand that I'm advocating for in the piece. What can you do as a teacher? Maybe you're not going to get up and protest. Who can you write to? Who can you talk to? What person in your community can you begin to convince that this is not a good idea? Because, again, teachers' voices, we're the last people asked, and that's why I so appreciate that you give teachers such a voice on this show, but we're the last people asked to do our opinion or our expertise. We're the ones who know how implausible it is to actually be in school safely. So that would be number one, how sort of rebranding how we look at our dedication. No, it doesn't mean go out and buy your own PPE. It means get on Facebook and start posting stuff. It means write to your governor. It means talk to your superintendent, whatever it is. And then kind of once this sort of dust settles on all of this crisis that we're in, I would love to see teachers begin to sort of, first of all, one huge piece is the standardized test piece, that if we can kind of we got away from it last year, nobody died, right? Like, we don't need that driving the education system.
Right.
So if we remove that from the picture, then we have a whole different ballgame. We're going to be in a new world, as it is. And if we can sort of reframe education without that piece, then we can say, okay, so how can we leverage what teachers can offer? And I think then you're looking at a idea of, okay, we have these educated professionals. We're one of the only few professions that requires a graduate degree. So number one, we're educated professionals. Number two, we have these two twin pillars that we now have the opportunity to embed into schools: social emotional learning and social justice. And if we take those two pillars and kind of build around those, now we have a wraparound, holistic educational system that is going to kind of serve the needs that we need for the future. We don't need kids to remember facts and figures anymore. They carry every recorded word in human history in their pockets.
Right.
So they need to know how to be able to relate to people. They need to know how to critically think. They need to know how to creatively think, solve problems. They need curriculum that's more culturally responsive and more inclusive. And I think that that would be kind of like down the line, 10 steps ahead, how I would like to see education and teachers rebranded.
Yeah, or as I've said, reclaim your profession and make it the profession that it is, of professionals who are doing their work instead of just assembly line factory workers who are teaching to the test. I agree with you. Again, the piece, Why Rebranding Teachers Will Save Lives, written by Christine Vaccaro. We'll get links out on our social media, how you can take a look at it. Christine, I appreciate the time. Always great talking with you. Thanks so much.
You too, Rick. Thank you so much. And by the way, I know the last time we spoke, your daughter was interested in being a teacher. Do you still feel that way after all this?
Yeah, I'm still trying to talk her out of it. No, I would be thrilled if she were, but then,
yeah, we need some tough kids in there. That'd be good.
She's still, for all of its faults. But Christine, I appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Rick. Take care. Bye-bye.
Good stuff. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
These are multiple-story homes, reduced to nothing but rubble.
More fossil fuel disasters. Deadly natural gas explosion levels homes in Baltimore.
The island nation of Mauritius is under a state of emergency.
Fuel spill creates ecological disaster for Mauritius. Buckle up for a hyperactive hurricane season. July 2020 was the third hottest July ever recorded globally.
Third hottest. It must be getting cooler.
Plus,
given temperature trends, researchers expected the ice shelf to collapse, just not so soon.
And then there were none. Canada's last intact ice shelf collapses.
All of those collapses and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
He's following the radical left agenda. He's against energy, our kind of energy.
Your kind of energy? Oh, you mean dirty, expensive, dangerous fossil fuels that blow up, make people sick, and destroy the planet? Oh, maybe I'll vote for Joe Biden then. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, I guess Donald Trump has a certain special kind of energy that is only for Republicans?
Who knows what he's trying to talk about?
I have no idea, but apparently fossil fuels are blowing up all over the country and the world.
Yes, more tragic, avoidable fossil fuel destruction underway in Baltimore, Maryland. A major natural gas explosion on Monday leveled 3 Baltimore homes, killing 2 and seriously injuring 6 others and knocking out electricity amid a heat wave. The exact cause of this natural gas explosion is under investigation, but it occurred 4 years to the day after a similar natural gas explosion killed 7 in nearby Silver Spring, Maryland. It appears similar to the deadly natural gas explosion in Massachusetts in 2018 that was caused by an overpressurized system.
Any solar panel explosions today?
Nope.
Any wind farm disasters?
Nope.
Huh.
Another fossil fuel disaster is unfolding for the Indian Ocean island nation of Mauritius. A cargo ship that ran aground 2 weeks ago has begun breaking apart. More than 1,000 tons of diesel fuel have already leaked from the ship, causing ecological damage to the pristine, protected marine parks, beaches, and fishing grounds that form the backbone of the country's tourism-based economy and its food supply.
Oh, well, so much for that tourism-based economy, I guess.
The Mauritius government was slow to respond, and now residents are creating homemade oil spill barriers out of sacks stuffed with leaves. Meanwhile, after a record start to the 2020 Atlantic hurricane season, NOAA has updated its forecast, warning of, quote, an extremely active season still to come.
Of course.
NOAA predicts as many as 25 total named storms, pushing named storms into the Greek alphabet, and that includes 3 to 6 major hurricanes fueled by unusually warm oceans. That's only happened once before in 2005, the year of Hurricane Katrina.
Well, it's 2020. I would expect no less, except for maybe a couple of sharknadoes to go with it.
Landfalling U.S. hurricanes bring regional flooding and tornadoes deep inland and would do this on top of the coronavirus pandemic. CBS News meteorologist Jeff Baradelli warns that the bulk of hurricane season doesn't normally hit until September and October.
We're actually in an inactive couple of week pattern right now. What that means for everyone watching right now is get ready, because after that cyclical pattern is over and we get back into an active phase, they're going to come fast, they're going to come furious, and we need to be ready for that.
We are at the 9th named storm already. Usually that does not happen until mid-October.
Yeah. In other news, July 2020 was the third hottest July ever recorded globally. That's according to the European Union's climate monitoring service Copernicus. Only July 2019 and 2016 were warmer, and that means that the 3 hottest Julys all occurred within the last 5 years. NOAA and NASA are expected to announce similar findings in coming weeks. 2020 is forecast to be one of the top 2 hottest years ever recorded and has brought scorching heat records to both the Arctic and the Antarctic, thanks to man-made global warming.
Thanks, man-made global warming.
And that has caused Canada's last fully intact ice shelf to collapse into the Arctic Ocean. Satellite imagery shows it took just 48 hours for the 4,000-year-old Milne ice shelf to break up, losing more than 40% of its ice, an area bigger than the island of Manhattan. The fast collapse is a result of widespread Arctic warming, according to Carleton University ice scientist Derek Mueller in an interview with Global News.
Little changes in temperature year over year can unleash a very big response.
He said his team is lucky that coronavirus travel restrictions prevented them from being literally on that ice shelf when it broke apart.
You know, this climate change hoax is quite elaborate. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Don't forget you can download our reports anytime via Stitcher, TuneIn, Apple, or Google Podcasts. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So the Twitters are filled today with the nasty woman comment. I guess Trump's got a path. He's got a history, doesn't he? You go back to Hillary. Hillary was a nasty woman. He's called Nancy Pelosi a nasty woman, and now Kamala Harris a nasty woman. But yet the woman that he was asked about with Jeffrey Epstein, that Maxwell woman, he wished her well, which you kind of wonder, wouldn't she? I mean, if you're being consistent, wouldn't she be part of the nasty woman? I'm just kind of throwing that out there. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the big first appearance today of Joe Biden and his running mate, Kamala Harris. I've got our good friend, former congressman and political analyst, Bob Ney, to come talk with us. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Well, thank you, Rick.
So, nasty woman. Yeah, she's a nasty. I guess let's start there. Were you surprised at how quickly the Trump campaign got their attack ad out? It was less than like 10 minutes.
They're all good at this. They probably had 5 different ones, okay, depending on who was going to be picked. Seriously.
And they were all going to be nasty women.
It was all going to be nasty. On this pick, which I think Senator Harris is a much better pick, frankly, than Rice. But on this pick, here's their problem, and that's why you saw the nasty woman right out of the box first, because she's hard to define. She, with Rice, it had been Benghazi City, right?
Right, and Obamagate.
Yeah, and the liberal, and they can call her liberal, but she actually had a problem in the primary because she was kind of going between the progressive and the moderate. So they can deem the most liberal ever, quote, and nasty, quote, but the truth remains that she's going to be very, very hard for them to define, number one, Rick, and number two, they better be very, very careful how they define her.
Well, I mean, I saw the woman who's the chair of the RNC, who was asked about the phony woman, the phony Kamala frame that they threw out, because that was the attack ad right away, that she's the most liberal ever, she's going to be horrible, and that she's phony, along with Sleepy Joe. And this McDaniel came out and said, no, this is going to work, because women get it, women know that she's a phony. And I'm going, I don't know that that's really something. Maybe this is the game plan. Do you think it's going to work? Do you think labeling her as a phony is the right thing right out of the gate?
No. First of all, can we talk first about race and sex? How about that?
Sure, go there.
We do that. It's always good to talk about sex. Let's talk about sex first. They're going to throw out the Willie Brown. I knew Willie Brown. He was, when he was speaker, a very powerful speaker, and it is no secret that she had a relationship with Willie Brown, who was estranged from his wife from 1981. No secret. It's been raised by Democrats. It's been raised by Republicans. It's out there. So, when they are going to throw out the sex part, because somebody did that actually on my Facebook, and I deleted it. They made a comment about her, if you can imagine what it was, and I deleted it. That's not going to work, because look, do they really want to talk about tapes that the president's voice was on? All right.
No, but here's the thing. This is the weird part. Yes, they do, because
I know, but
his base doesn't care. I mean, that's the hypocrisy of this whole situation. And look, the slut shaming is going to, I think, will play at a certain level with because it's a woman. If it's a man, that's different. He was out sowing his wild oats. I think some of that still plays with a segment of the older population.
Well, it might, but it's really, they're going to have to watch how they approach it. It'll come back on them and backfire. And then the race part. I mean, it's really making my head spin when I hear people say, well, she's not black. She's Jamaican. First of all, she's half Jamaican, and she is half Indian,
right?
From South India, Tamil Nadu area, which I've been down to in India. She is a woman of color. Now, they can say she isn't. She is. So that, as we say in Appalachia, that dog ain't going to hunt, right? If they try to go that way.
So you're saying that the argument right now is that she's not officially black enough.
Correct.
Is that what it is? Okay.
Correct. That's what I'm actually hearing. She's Jamaican. That's Afro-Caribbean. That's what I was told today.
Okay.
And I said to my friend, "You got to be kidding me." She will define herself as she wants, and she is a woman of color. And try negating that. So, I just want to get those two things out of the way. But as far as a phony, this one I really, really don't get, because if you look at her background. I mean, it is truly, and I've followed her background for quite a while. It's truly an amazing story. Raised by her mother, she's been both to Baptist church and Hindu temples. She's had a very interesting, background. She was part of the whole segregation issue, busing in, out in California. She, in 2016, she defeated Loretta Sanchez, who I served with in the Senate election. To succeed Barbara Boxer. She had been the Attorney General of the state of California, prosecutor out in, which, by the way, some progressives have a problem with her prosecutorial record, but she was a prosecutor out there. She's really, far, far beyond phony. She has credentials.
Right. Well,
credentials.
What's that old saying? When the facts are on your side, you argue the facts. When they're not, you pound your fist on the table, and when neither on your side, you scream, holler, and do all of that. This is them just screaming and hollering and all that.
And let me tell you where phony evaporates. I know Mike Pence. I served in Congress with Mike Pence. I remember when he came into the Congress, right? Mike Pence was pretty capable with the Freedom Caucus he was with and putting some bills out and things like that. But let me tell you something. As far as phony and Senator Harris, wait till they debate. Wait till they debate, Rick.
No, and this is what I tweeted that out immediately.
She is a master at it.
I said this immediately. That's the one reason that I, for all along throughout this whole process of waiting, I was saying Harris is going to bring that attack dog mentality to the campaign, and that debate is going to be well worth the price of admission, and they should charge an admission price because maybe we can start paying down some of our debt. But I'm whenever it is, I'm marking the calendar. I'm taking the day off work. We're gonna watch it.
Right. Now, that doesn't mean this election's over with by any stretch of the imagination. We have to see what happens. Progressives have to come into order and not be so harsh about her, quote, prosecutor's record, which, some of them right now are grumbling about it. But whoever would have been picked, there would have been an issue. There would have been a leftist, a liberal, this would have been out there.
Yeah, there's nobody good enough. There's nobody ever going to be perfect enough. And I said this from the beginning. She wasn't my first choice. But, she was, and this is the weird part, she was the safe choice. And as I said yesterday on the show, it's amazing how far the party has gone to where a woman of color was the safe choice. I think that's pretty remarkable.
Well, that's true. And also in her case, if it's pushed too far about her record in California, frankly, that's when progressives who tell me they're, not happy with her, and I say, well, you're going to vote for Trump? Is that what you're going to tell me?
And that's what it is. I've had a bunch of people tell me, well, I'm not voting for him now because he picked her. And I'm going, well, why? Where are you going to go?
Yeah, you're going to go with Trump. So when they, meaning the Trump campaign, expose certain things about her record, they're actually going to hurt themselves, because if you trumpet too much about her prosecutorial days, the end result, she's going to probably pick up some moderate votes.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting point.
Sure.
And, as I pointed out today, you had Wall Street coming out and very, very, happily, endorsing Harris along with Silicon Valley. There were a number of people in both of those communities very happy at her choice because she is a moderate. She's not going to be the one cheerleading the Medicare for all. She's moved away from that. In fact, in today's appearance, she was very clear that she wants to strengthen the ACA and she's going to move forward on that. And I thought her appearance today was I don't know if you watched it, but I thought it was excellent. I thought it softened her a little bit. I thought she came off and very likable, and I think she hit on a number of the topics that where those progressive concerns were. I think she hit on a couple of those today.
I think she did. Her presence was extremely good, very relaxed, smiling, very personable. I thought she really did a very good job today. Now, there's a couple of minefield areas for her, especially because she, is black, and those couple of areas, quote, defunding the police, they're going to say that she wants to shut everything down is what they're going to say. And issues like reparations, civil rights issues. So when I say minefield, she's smart, and she'll be careful, I think, not to be caught in a trap that she looks like she's not for anybody but a person of color. I don't think she's going to come off that way. They're going to try it, though.
Right. No, and this is where, someone had asked me what I thought of her. I said I thought she's going to bring the energy and the passion. She's going to bring, a whole new boatload of energy to the campaign and be an extremely, good, partner in this. Or she could potentially be the Democrat Sarah Palin. To where it then becomes all about her, and then we get bogged down in a lot of those issues. I don't think that's going to happen, but the potential is there.
Well, you raise a very interesting point, because today I was looking at her. She brings a vibrancy and energy. Look, I serve with Joe Biden. I always liked Joe Biden, but right now it's not the most exciting kind of campaign on earth, right? And I think she brings a brand new energy into it, gives it a brand new life, and it really enhances Joe Biden. I think she does. I think she enhances him. However, they have to be smart to not let the media turn this into her and then put him down a peg in the sense of the media coverage. And they're smart. They'll try to follow that, because you're right. You don't want that becoming like the John McCain, Sarah Palin deal.
Because here's the thing, and this is one of those moments where I thought Hillary made a huge mistake in choosing Tim Kaine. And I personally believe, she probably likes him and they're probably friends and all of that. But I think in the calculus was you don't want somebody who's going to outshine you. And he clearly was never going to outshine her. The thought that I have is, Harris could easily, if the media stuff takes off and we end up in a world where now she's the focus, and it's Sleepy Joe and it's Uncle Joe as an afterthought.
Right, and you're right on Kane. I mean, I'm sorry, but it was like watching paint dry, and they wanted that to happen, so Hillary would be the focus point. And I think they knew in taking Senator Harris that they have a quote semi sort of risk that she's younger, vibrant, this and that, and full of energy. But I think it'll enhance if they do it correctly. It will enhance, and it's going to be up to her. Because the media, you know them, the national corporate media, they're going to love to try to find some way to pit her against him.
Yeah, well, the first major attack that'll probably come out is obviously the debate over the busing issue, of which, I said from the beginning, and I stand by, I was not a fan of busing. I lived through it. My neighborhood was one of the neighborhoods where they took poor kids out of my neighborhood, shipped them 2.5 hours on the other side of Cleveland to the other poor neighborhood. And the facilities were terrible. Everything was crumbling and falling down, but we had the right mix. Instead of, in my view, there was so many more things that we could have done other than shuffling kids around and causing that kind of chaos.
Sure.
I gotta assume that that's going to be something that's obviously a thing that they're going to try and continue to bait them with. And also, again, I'm sure you've seen it as well. The Tara Reid thing keeps popping up, even though I'll tell you, I don't see any there. No. But there's a segment of the media that really wants that to be a story.
Right. Well, on the racist part, she did not say he was a racist. She threw some barbs there about, issue of busing. She was a little girl, et cetera, in California. But she said that I do not believe you are a racist. She said that right out front during the debate. And she said, I agree with you when you commit yourself to finding common ground. Now, so I don't think they can use that, but they will attempt, to use a quote when she said, I believe them and I respect them being able to tell their story and having courage to do it. She wasn't talking about Tara Reid. She was talking about some inappropriate touching, but she also went on to say that Joe Biden has stood up for women, supported women's rights and women's equality. So those two statements, though, are being turned into where she said, quote, he did something and that he is a racist. And that is not what, that's not exactly what she said whatsoever.
Yeah, but there were a lot of people who, when that came out, by saying, I don't believe you're a racist, you're actually saying, I believe you're a racist.
Right. I know. Like I said, she said some barbs. There was no question about it.
Yep.
But we do remember voodoo economics?
Sure.
They said it on Reagan?
Yeah. No, it was George H.W. Bush who said it.
Right, exactly.
No, I remember it like it was yesterday, and sadly he sold his soul to become vice president.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It was.
And one other thing, because we're on your show, it is very, very, very critical. She's from California, but it's very critical that she relates to working people. He's from Pennsylvania, and he relates to working people, and they have that component. This is not just going to be about them, their personalities, and Trump. They've got to have that working class component that Hillary threw away.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. And she did, during her spiel today, she did hit on some of that, which I was happy to hear.
Thought it was good.
I thought today was really good for them.
Sure.
The energy is way high. They're evidently bringing in a boatload of money off of this. So good things.
All big money. The most raised by the one group.
Yeah,
10 million.
Yeah, I'm looking at it going, this is a good. I would be happy with this coupling going forward.
Right.
Maybe we could clean up some of the mess that we've got. I did want to get your thoughts on another topic. I was looking at Steny Hoyer's calendar yesterday. Evidently, no more voting until September 14th. I'm perplexed because, politically, just going home. I know it's an election year. I know it's summer. I get all of that. But is it the wrong idea to just be bailing out of town when people fell off the unemployment cliff, and we've left it to Trump with some executive orders we're not even sure he's going to be able to pull off? Is this a smart thing to do, you think?
I don't think it's a smart thing to do. I think they have to realize, putting the payroll tax aside, because he's blown a temporary hole, in Social Security, and then that could or couldn't be corrected, and that's important. But he went with the 400. Ohio's already said, fine, we're going to do our 25%, et cetera. And I think it's a calculated mistake if they just think that, well, he's sort of like a carnival showman and he did this, and he did a smart thing, because Mitch McConnell did a not smart thing and didn't pass a bill. So right now they're kind of giving a break, and I think both sides are kind of saying, well, all right, we'll just see what happens for a little bit back home. Now, in the good old days, you go back to county fairs and you'd probably want to get in your car and leave because people would be screaming at you. Today, with the COVID, the political people aren't out like they used to be, out around people.
Yeah.
So maybe they're not getting as much heat as they might get a little bit closer to November.
Yeah, the story that I came across today was that the headline read, "Republicans believe they've got the upper hand in the COVID-19 aid stalemate," and I'm like, is this what we've basically boiled this down to? Who believes they've got the upper hand in the politics game when millions of people are really struggling and the pain is really, it's real. And at what point do voters go, I've had enough of this, and we just throw all the bums out?
I thought, it's going to, look, the stats, you and I covered this about 2 weeks ago. The Democrats dumped down, in the numbers. The Republicans were already dumped down in the numbers. And, people, when they get angry, I know I went through this when I was in Congress. No matter if you pass something, you can say, well, we passed something. Well, the Senate didn't. Well, make them pass it. People have this thought. They just want it done.
Yeah.
And then pretty soon you all get blamed for it.
No, and this is what I keep telling people. Everyone's like, oh, we're going to get Joe Biden elected and Kamala Harris is going to be the vice president. It's going to be great. I'm going, no, it's not going to be great unless you get the Senate. If you don't get the Senate, it's going to be basically what we've got now, gridlock. Nothing gets done. Everything by executive order. Now, granted, there'll be better executive orders, but here again, we could have this kind of back and forth, one term to the next term of executive orders.
Well, sure.
And this is not a good way to run a lemonade stand. Sorry.
Right, you have to have the Senate, and that's one of the reasons Elizabeth Warren, had she been picked, you'd have had a Republican governor making a decision on a Senate. In California, you have a Democrat governor. That was another positive thing to this seat, for the control of the Senate.
Yeah, any idea who's going to be in there? Because I tweeted out yesterday, I thought Tom Steyer was going to buy himself a seat.
That's interesting. I never thought about that.
Look, he bought himself onto the campaign trail.
Right.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a bunch of other people. I guess Garcetti is the inside choice.
Poor Tom, he's got money, but remember he was just sort of happy to be there to shake Bernie's hand. Remember?
I do. That was funny. And finally, I want to get your thoughts on the most recent attempt to deregulate. Evidently, the Trump administration is moving forward with the Department of Energy to undo the shower heads. That during the Obama term they pushed for low flow shower heads. Well, Trump's gonna release the water.
I didn't know this one. Okay, so you won't have the restrictive shower heads.
Yeah, evidently this is the latest big. This is I guess this is the new campaign push. We're putting more methane into the air because the EPA is rolling back the Obama era regulations on methane. So all of those pipelines that they're building, they don't have to worry about releasing methane into the air, which is a horrible greenhouse gas. And at least we can get the methane off of us with these new old kind of shower heads. That's all I can come up with. It's the best I can do.
They're going to take on the big, mean, nasty, efficient shower heads. Now that's going to get them a lot of votes. Just kidding.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to know. How often does your shower head break that you replace it anyway? Come on.
I've actually had the one I have now for
mine too.
20 years.
Forever.
It's metal, and that's why I hold on to it. But
Maybe
then again,
next election, I have to replace it. I'll think about them.
There you go. Good stuff. As always, Bob, I appreciate the time.
Thank you, Rick.
Thanks so much. Our good friend, Bob Ney. Look, I don't know. Do you think the shower head will get them some votes? Do you think by releasing the flow at a time when, potentially, the parts of the country, might have drought problems at some point? Again, I still believe anything with Obama's name on it, he has to destroy. And I guess this is part of it. There you go. Quick break, right back. Stick around.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1894. That was the day that federal troops pushed Kelly's Industrial Army out of Washington, D.C. and across the Potomac River. The Army was a group of unemployed men who had come to the nation's capital to protest government inaction. The country was in the grip of an economic depression. The nation's agricultural regions in the South and Great Plains were also hit by a drought. Times were hard for American workers and families. The call had gone out across the nation for the unemployed to make their way to the doorstep of Congress. The goal was to petition for public infrastructure projects to put people back to work. Businessman Jacob Coxey had organized a March of the Unemployed from Ohio. Charles T. Kelly and his group came from California. They rode the rails and made it to Des Moines, Iowa, where they encamped. After a while, the local residents decided the unemployed group had outstayed their welcome. The Iowans provided lumber so the Industrial Army could build flatboats and be on their way. By the time Charles Kelly and his men made it to D.C., Coxey had already been sentenced to 20 days in jail for trespassing on the Capitol lawn. Yet unemployed men from across the country kept coming into the nation's capital. 1,200 men arrived from different points across the country. One of those in Kelly's group was a young author by the name of Jack London. London wrote of his experience, quote, "Across the wild and woolly West, clear from California, General Kelly and his heroes captured trains. But they fell down when they crossed the Missouri and went up against the effete East. The marchers' protests earned no help from Congress." Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
This is an interesting story coming out of New Zealand. Evidently, New Zealand's Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, evidently yesterday announced that there's going to be a new lockdown. They've confirmed four new cases in the country. The first cases in the UK, in New Zealand, since 102 days. So first time they've gotten a case in 102 days. They've got four of them. They are locking down. The report says all the cases came from the same household in Auckland, New Zealand's biggest city. The lockdown will last from midday Wednesday through midnight Friday. Schools, businesses, bars, and other non-essential places will be closed. They say these 3 days will give us time to assess the situation, gather information, and make sure we have widespread contact tracing so we can find out more about how these cases arose and make decisions about how to respond. They got 4 cases. They shut everything down. Now I know there are going to be some of my anti-mask friends who go, that's just too extreme. This is how you deal with this stuff. And this is what I've been saying from the beginning. Had we taken that period that we were all somewhat locked down, we were all somewhat, here in Pennsylvania, a lot of people did stay home. In New York, a lot of people were locked down. Had we done a really hard shutdown for 1 good month, as a country united going, nobody goes anywhere. Today, you go get your supplies, You get it for a month. If you don't have the resources to do it, we make sure that somehow we get federal funding to make sure that people can hole up in their homes, in their places of shelter for an entire month. We commandeer hotels if we have to. We do all of the stuff that we have to make sure that nothing moves. People stay home. People stay away from each other. And then you go and you find who has it. And you trace down who those folks came in contact with, and you pull them out of society. You quarantine them. You make sure that they get better. You make sure that before they go back into the fields with the rest of us, they don't have it. This is how you have to do it. The magic thinking of just one day, oh, it's just going to go away. One day, it'll just disappear. Never bought that. Sorry, never buying the wishful thinking. Just not. And, as I said earlier, yesterday was another day of in excess of 1,000 people dying. I think it was something like 1,282 people died yesterday. Thanks Florida and Georgia. Thanks southern states who basically flipped your nose at the rest of us who were struggling. We were staying home. We were doing what we were supposed to do to flatten the curve. And yet, I knew people who were running around all over the South going, hey, it's great. There's nothing going on. This is great tourist time. We're having the time of our lives. And now what's happening? It has resurged. And as I said from the beginning, this is still the first wave. We haven't gotten through the first part of it yet. And all of the experts agree, it's the next one that's going to really be bad. We're nowhere near prepared. The fact that we can't get a simple infrastructure put into place to say, you know what, if it does come back, and this is where this gap should have been, this is where the things should have been worked out. This is where a leader with any absolute sense would have said, hey, we got this little breather, we got this little break, let's figure out the problems going forward. Let's figure out what it is that we need to do to make sure that, well, we don't have to do this again and again. Let's figure out how to make a mechanism to say, okay, well, when we shut down again, people continue to get their paychecks. That we're going to fund this like other countries do. That people don't lose their health insurance. People don't lose their homes. Instead of having to have a guy who purely for political reasons signs a couple of executive orders that we're not even sure are going to work, doing something for purely political reasons when our Congress is going, I passed mine. Let's all go home. I'm beyond angry because the sad reality is I know people who are having a hard time. And I hear from people all the time who say, now that the $600 are gone, I'm poverty. We're not going to be able to pay our rent. We're not going to be able to pay our mortgage. And I know there's a moratorium, but Rick, there's a moratorium. They can't be thrown out of their house. Donald signed the executive order. Yeah, for federal. He doesn't have any control over state laws. So how many people are going to lose their homes in the interim? Because all it's going to take is one guy to file a lawsuit against any one of those executive orders, and now it's tied up. This is where Congress, this is where Mitch McConnell, this is where the Republicans have to step forward. And I've been saying this for 4 years. The only hope that the country has in these moments is a functional Republican Party. I don't want to see them collapse. I don't want to see them decimated. I want to see a vibrant Republican Party. I want to see a party that has some values, when they talk about family values and they talk about being pro-life, this is the moment that should shine. These are those moments where being pro-life actually means helping people stay alive. I know, it's radical. It's a radical thought. That when someone tells you that they're pro-life, that they actually believe that the people who are alive should stay alive. I know, it's really crazy. But that's kind of what I take from being pro-life. Instead of what it really means is they're pro-birth. They want to force women to have children. And that's where it ends. As soon as the child's born, screw them, let them die now. We don't care. Oh, but Rick, you're being harsh. Show me legislation that shows you any different. Show me what they have done. I don't want to hear their words. I'm tired of their words. Their words are hollow. Their actions are cold and calculated. And this all plays out right in front of us when you've got someone like Ron Johnson saying, I hope it all fails. We're not going to spend another dime. Screw those people. Make them go back to work. So that we can spread the virus even more. And that would be great. That would be great. Now, look, there's some who are very, very happy because we know who the virus affects. Seniors, overwhelmingly, and the minority communities who don't have access to good health care. And the poor. If this is one of those moments where if you want to kill off the downtrodden, here you go. And I'm sure part of this, I'm sure there's somewhere in the Republican Party where this is the thinking. Scary times. But again, almost 1,300 people died, and it's still party time down in Florida. Still party time. Oh, frustrating and crazy all at the same time. But like I said, there's hope. Come November, hopefully we will go to the polls. We will cast our ballots, and we will throw the bums out who have left us in the lurch in this moment of need. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go, wherever you go. And as always, email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people... Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.